How do you do? In light of pressures from the ecology and population, how should this alter the economic policies of our country?
We have spent the past 2 days driving across the Middle West, the empty spaces of Nebraska and of Wyoming, and I must say pressures of ecology and population were not very obvious to us as we drove across. I think there are real problems. There are no problems of population. The United States is an underpopulated country by the standards of almost any place in the world. Now, I'm not saying it's desirable to have a bigger population. I think that's a false issue so far as the United States is concerned. That what is desirable is to have a system under which parents, people who choose to have children, bear the costs and the full responsibilities of those children. And I think if we have a system of that kind, under which you do not artificially encourage population or artificially discourage population, why then you will tend to have about the right population. The figment of Malthusianism is very real in some parts of the world, but it has not been real in the advanced countries of the world. It has not been real in Great Britain, it has not been real in Japan, it has not been real in the United States. The rate of population growth in the United States has been slowing down, as you know. So I do not believe there is really a real problem of population. In fact, as you know, most of this country has fewer people per acre now than it did 100 years ago. People have voluntarily chosen to concentrate in large agglomerations in big cities. And then they complain that there are big cities. Now, the ecology problem, the problem of pollution, and of maintaining clean water and clean air, that's a very real problem. That's not the same as a population problem, not at all. There, too, a large part of our problem arises from governmental measures that have had the opposite effects to those which are desired. Let me give you a very simple example right now. There's a big hue and cry about the steel industry and about imposing tariffs on higher tariffs or import quotas on steel. Now, every ecologist in this country ought to be on the right side of that issue, which is a free trade issue. If Japan chooses to subsidize the export of clean air to the United States, why should we object? Isn't that what it's doing when it sends steel here? But here, we have this great hue and cry that we should somehow or other subsidize steel, either by tariffs or quotas or in other ways, to enable steel to produce both its product and its pollution at home. Now, personally, I'm just in favor of free trade. I want even rules. I don't want to give any subsidy to pollution. On the contrary, I would like to tax those activities that create pollution. But we're going about it in a very foolish and unwise fashion. We're going about it by trying to regulate the equipment which people use. And that's a very bad way to do it. Far better to impose an effluent tax and then leave it to the ingenuity of people to minimize the cost. So there is a real problem about pollution and ecology. It's not a growing problem. Make no mistake about it. The only reason we have so much more attention to ecology and pollution today than we did 50 or 75 years ago is that we're rich enough to be able to afford the luxury. The water is cleaner today and safer to drink than it was 100 years ago, not only in the United States but all over the world. The air is cleaner today. The automobile has been a source of less pollution, not more. Have you ever seen any calculations of what the streets of our big cities would look like if we were still using horses to pull things? So there is a real problem. And the fact that we are rich enough means that we should pay attention to that problem. We can afford to do something more about it than we did earlier. But we must not go down the haywire and create more myths that somehow or other we've been destroying an untroubled continent. You know, there are more acres of woods growing now than there were 100 years ago because it has been profitable to grow wood for lumber. The greatest protection of wildlife has not come from governmental measures to protect wildlife. It has come from the Audubon Society and from other private associations, and it has come, interestingly enough, from the people who are providing for profit private hunting preserves. This has given them an incentive to establish wildlife sanctuaries privately in Canada to preserve the source of the birds and so on which other people hunt. So all I'm saying to you is there's a real problem here, but put it in perspective. And don't think that the answer is always another governmental law which will restrict the freedom of people to use their own resources.